is the best baseball player ever to wear number 5. Best baseball player ever. Was he 5? Third base baseball. Okay, Debbie, we should probably start.
Okay, I'll go ahead and transfer over. Just 1 second.
Well, good evening, and thank you for joining us either by phone or live stream for the 5th of 5 community input sessions regarding establishing the new Sioux Falls School District boundaries. For those of you who have followed each session, this will be a bit redundant at the beginning, but I don't want to assume that everyone has heard this information before today. As you know, we passed a $190 million bond issue in September of 2018. As a result of the Sioux Falls community providing an overwhelming show of support, we now must make sure that we're using those resources and are providing and using those resources in the best way that serves our city. For this exercise, that resource is our school buildings. So let's begin this process again. This certainly is not the way we intended to hold community engagement sessions on this important topic. However, the day we were supposed to hold our first in-person meeting at Memorial Middle School was the day we canceled all non-essential activities in the Sioux Falls School District. The following day, we were encouraged to close schools to prevent the spread of COVID-19, the coronavirus. And as you know, we've been in a remote learning environment ever since. As we thought through our original goal, we realized that the point was to hear from the public. And while we would enjoy seeing you in person, your ability to be heard is still our main goal. And this listening methodology accomplishes that goal. This topic is important to us, and we know it's important to our families as well. That is why we have moved ahead with the 5 input sessions. Over the past months, we've continued to receive community feedback via the Let's Talk application. I know we have now received well over 400 pieces of information through that tool prior to the first engagement meeting, or since we've started this process. We've received an additional 100 since that first engagement meeting. And thanks to you, we hope to continue to get more. Please keep those coming. We encourage you to use the Let's Talk application on our website, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. We're confident that we're still on track to allow the school board to formally adopt new boundaries. The new boundaries will go into effect for the 21-22 school year. We will conclude this process by the end of June as originally planned. Now, for a few housekeeping items before we start taking questions tonight. In order to accommodate all questions and callers, we ask that you only call in to ask your question once during the 5 meetings. We want to give everyone a chance to be heard. You are welcome to listen clearly on all of the meetings, but please, 1 call per person so we can cover the largest number of topics in the 5 meetings. Make your questions or comments succinct. And I know that can be tough, but through the first 4 meetings, you've done really well in that regard. In order for us to get to as many questions as possible, we're hoping to keep each question and answer to a total of approximately 3 minutes. Obviously, that would allow us to get through about 20 callers in an hour. If someone has already asked your question or made the same point that you hoped to make, please remove yourself from the call queue so we can move on to another topic. Throughout this process, we've had the Let's Talk application. I mentioned this earlier. Submitting questions and comments via Let's Talk equates to the same level of input as calling in this evening. The school board will receive all of those comments, just as they will hear comments that are made tonight. If you're not aware of the Let's Talk tool, you can find it on the district website, which is SF, as in Sioux Falls, sf.k12.sd.us, sf.k12.sd.us. There's a blue flag on the right side of the screen. Simply click that vertical flag, select your topic, and write your question or comment. If you're wondering whether or not we received that information, you will get a follow-up email. You will know that we received the information. And finally, please keep your comments professional. I can assure you that no one intends to create a hardship for your family, and we will be respectful of every question that you ask. Please be respectful of the process. Our primary goal is to assign students to schools in a manner that maintains focus on the priorities set by the board. Priorities such as student safety, budget considerations, using natural boundaries where possible, and keeping contiguous neighborhoods together if at all possible. The number for you to call this evening is on your screen. It is 1-800-874-4559. 1-800-874-4559. Participants will be asked for a code. The code is Ben Schumacher. You will answer a series of questions like your first name, your last name, and where your children attend school, etc. The operator will place you on hold so you can listen to other callers and then let you know when it is your turn to ask a question. Finally, we're showing 2 options for Ben Rifle Middle School and 2 options for Thomas Jefferson High School. I think it's important to realize that we have seen and considered other options and have looked at other similar configurations to these options. Also, we will continue to look for the best option available. I truly believe that what you see as our current options will be massaged during this next month and for the duration of this process, and certainly prior to any board approval. These are your schools, and we want to hear from you on how best to put the boundaries together. Before we kick off the questions tonight, I want to summarize a few topics from our first 4 meetings that might help with questions that currently exist and might help us to get to other topics this evening. The first is regarding grandfathering of students. The question would be, will students currently attending a school be able to continue in that school once boundaries are redrawn? The answer is the decision to grandfather students has yet to be determined. Our task force gave information on this topic, and we had a student advisory group provide feedback on this topic. While there was not a unanimous opinion, and our Board of Education will ultimately decide this answer, it would be more likely that somebody who will be a senior would be grandfathered rather than somebody who has just finished their freshman year. But no guarantees of grandfathering exist today. That answer is still to come. Another question is that on open enrollment, and will it continue after the boundaries are redrawn? The answer is yes. We will have open enrollment in the future. Open enrollment is predicated on the amount of room a building has. The Board of Education sets limits on building capacity And if a building is under capacity, we allow open enrollment. The third question, it comes regarding the splitting of schools. Will any of our schools be split in their transition from middle school to high school or from elementary school to middle school? And the answer is, unfortunately, yes. We've looked to minimize the splitting of buildings as students transition from elementary to middle school and middle school to high school. But just as is the case today, we will continue to have a few schools that have to be split as they make those transitions. A fourth question is the issue of drive times. Will drive times and safe paths to school be considered as we put our boundaries together? Safe paths to schools are crucial in our planning. The school district currently sits on a path committee where we communicate with city officials on creating and maintaining safe paths to schools. Those committees are made up of folks who specialize in safe paths to schools, including city engineers. We will maintain our seat on that committee and stay steadfast in providing safe routes to schools. As we work to plan our new schools and look at new routes, please know that we currently have students driving across town in many instances due to the configuration of our current boundaries. We will look at the safety from a whole district perspective, because at times when the whole district perspective can get lost when we look at a microcosm of the school district and forget that we have to consider all students, all buildings, and all routes. Another question that we've heard about is that about programming, and will we decide programming in these meetings? You may have heard about conversations in our first several meetings regarding Spanish immersion and the honors program. And those two programs are currently held at Edison Middle School. And we have scenarios where those stay together and scenarios where those don't stay together. But I would tell you the discussion on continuing to keep those programs together, as you have heard, there's been some pro comments on keeping those programs together and some that were contrary to those original comments. The whole concept of programming is bigger, though, than simply Spanish immersion and the honors program. Some examples would be we have English language learner programs throughout the district. We have very specific special education programs in our school district. We have a challenge center in our school district. Just to give you some examples, hopefully you get the idea that while the Spanish immersion program and the honors program are specific to one of the issues that we're addressing here tonight, the issue of programming is far greater than just those two programs. While that issue is a highly technical issue, it likely will be finalized by the Board of Education after hearing from the community in these sessions, the community task force in a subsequent session, and then board deliberation before we get to the final boundary drawings. Finally, I want to remind folks that the necessity of the bond issue was centered in the overcrowding of our schools. That was never more apparent than when looking at our West Side schools. The two largest elementary schools in the state of South Dakota are on the west side of Sioux Falls. They are Discovery Elementary and Pettigrew Elementary. Both of those schools hover around 1,000 students. The largest middle school in the state of South Dakota is Memorial Middle School, also a West Side school. In fact, if Memorial Middle School were a high school, it would be the sixth largest school in our state, behind Roosevelt High School, Lincoln High School, Washington High School, Rapid City Stevens, and Rapid City Central High School. No other high school in our state is as large as Memorial Middle School. And the largest high school in all of South Dakota is Roosevelt High School. Roosevelt isn't the largest by a little bit. It's the largest by several hundred students. The point here, as we look at Roosevelt High School, Memorial Middle School, Discovery Elementary, and Pettigrew Elementary, is that we have a student population distribution problem to solve. And I know it's complicated, but we must move some of our students to help alleviate the overcrowding in our schools, particularly the schools on the west side of our community. Now, that took a while, and it's time to hear from you. So let's get started. Debbie, do you have a caller for us?
If anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad, star 1, and I'll access your line. We do have a question or comment from Andrew Olson. Your line is live.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. I had a question kind of regarding about adding to Roosevelt and the West Side schools of the position, especially regarding the high school, of separating Lincoln and Roosevelt on Western Avenue compared to Minnesota Avenue. And I think that also kind of deals with student safety as far as students biking to high school, and just what your position is on that.
Actually, I don't have a position on that, Andrew. I'm just taking comments on what your position on that is, so I can relay that to the Board of Education.
Yeah, well, this is a long-standing neighborhood of Lincoln High School students where I currently am, just north of Edison Middle School. And it just seems the distance between our neighborhood and Roosevelt compared to our neighborhood and Lincoln High School seems like a pretty drastic change. And so I believe one of the proposed borders was moving our Lincoln High School neighborhood to Roosevelt, and it just seems unsafe for students who, you know, either walk to high school or bike to high school or have other means of transportation. And I would just encourage the board to keep the border between Roosevelt and Lincoln High School at Western Avenue instead of moving that further east. And that's my comment.
Okay, I appreciate that. Well stated, Andrew. Thank you.
If anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad, star 1, and I'll access your line. And we do have a question or comment from Amanda. Your line is live.
Hi, good evening. I just had a statement regarding the Challenge Center and Robert Frost, how currently they're split in a sense where half of Robert Frost goes to Edison and half of it goes to Patrick Henry, depending upon the north or south of the river in a sense. And with the new proposal, either option A and B has Robert Frost going to Patrick Henry. However, with option A, the Challenge Center would also move to Patrick Henry, which would kind of go along with some of the remarks about keeping students that attend the same elementary, keep them together in the middle school. So I don't know if that opinion has been brought up much, but that would heavily impact my family. My child is at Robert Frost and at the Challenge Center, one of each, and they've made friends with each other in a sense. So the Challenge Center children have friends that go to Robert Frost, and the Robert Frost children have friends that go to the Challenge Center. So when that time comes to move into middle school, there will be that separation if the Challenge Center does move, or stay, I should say, stay at Edison. So just a kind of a reverse opinion of some of the others.
Yeah, what you're talking about is the honors program at the middle school and where that is housed.
Correct, exactly.
Yep, gotcha. Gotcha. We've had several comments on that, Amanda, and I appreciate yours.
Great, thank you so much.
You bet.
Just a reminder, if anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad, star 1. And we do have a question or comment from Brent Langston. Your line is live.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I have a few points regarding the priorities and statements that were made in past community input sessions. My daughter is a current freshman at Roosevelt, and in both high school options A and C, she would be forced to move to Jefferson for her junior and senior year due to our home being between 26th Street and 12th Street. We're within a block from Discovery Elementary. My comments tonight relate to making sure that all priorities set out are balanced in the final plan. And the current options appear to overly favor one bullet point listed out under priority 1, which is the socioeconomic status of the schools, which I understand is very important. But the priority 1 also addresses equitable programming at all schools. As you stated in previous meeting, Dr. Maher, it is a fact that programs such as sports and fine arts at a new school in the first years will not be the same caliber as they are currently in well-established programs. This may be acceptable for some students and their families, but it can be detrimental to other students who are looking for scholarship opportunities and or who plan to continue down these paths in the future. So I realize that scholarships aren't necessarily aren't determined on wins and losses. However, training can make significant impact on scholarship decisions and educational opportunities in the future. The new programs, staff, teams need time to reach the caliber of these established programs. And I also want to point out that also was mentioned before that several times that show choir is an activity essentially equated to sports. However, show choir is not only an activity, but it's also accredited class, unlike sports teams. Other priorities include, for us, include safe travel routes, minimize travel times, and keeping the neighborhoods together. As many people have stated, one, for instance, just a few minutes ago, this is not being done within option A and C for the areas, especially regarding the areas, our area between the 26th and 12th Street on the west side. Both options require that students travel on busier roads, especially during morning rush hour, and for farther distances. Many of these students who would typically walk to Roosevelt in order to catch a bus now to go to Jefferson. This doesn't make sense to me anyways. It'd make more sense to be safer, especially for these young drivers, to maybe from the center of town or between Western and I-29 to travel to Jefferson, since they're going to be driving anyways, and they would be able to go through safer routes to get to their school. As mentioned at previous meeting, the northwest part of the town is predicted to be one of the fastest growing in the next 5 years. But that being said, the two high school options appear to be short-sighted, more short-sighted, as it appears that at 5 years in the future, boundaries are going to need to be moved back closer to the current Roosevelt population. So you also mentioned at the beginning of every meeting that options are not finalized and are going to be massaged. So hopefully this input is helpful in those discussions, and hopefully the students who are currently attending schools should be given the option to stay within their schools that they're currently attending if they choose. So this consistency, I feel, I think that would benefit the majority of students. So.
Well, great comments, very well prepared. Thank you. I don't know how you would have made that more succinct. So I just appreciate your points. Clearly, you have paid attention all along. So, and I would echo the last comment that you made, or maybe it was the next to last comment you made. I don't know that the final plan exists yet. We'll have 5 members of the Board of Education that will determine that, and I promise you they're listening to you. So very well thought out points, and thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
If anyone has a question or comment, please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad, star 1, and I'll access your line. please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad if you'd like to make a question or comment. We do have a question or comment from Guido Alfonso. Your line is live.
Oh, thank you. My question is, it seems through the task force meetings that one of the main drivers for determining the different boundaries was balancing the socioeconomic groups between the different school systems. And it's quite clear instead that the teacher-to-student ratio will increase the education of people or children who are disadvantaged rather than trying to rebalance the socioeconomic groups. So what I see in the task force is that the number one driver is to try and rebalance socioeconomic groups, and it's not really for the advent of the kids that are closer to different schools. So I would like the topic to be addressed that why doesn't the Sioux Falls School District take the amount of money that they get from property taxes from kids that are going to private schools and decrease the student-to-teacher ratio in the disadvantaged schools, since that's more important to advance kids that are disadvantaged versus trying to rebalance the different schools artificially through this mechanism. The unintended consequence is that when you have a teacher that has 20 kids in the class, and there's, let's say, 4 or 5 kids that are disadvantaged, now you boost it to 10, then the unintended consequence is the other 10 kids that are in decent families that have enrichment, they get penalized for that.
A couple of things that I would say, and then I'll turn it over to Doug Morrison. I think I understand your point, but I'm not positive I'm crystal clear on your point. It is not the number one priority of the school district to rebalance the demographics of our schools, but certainly that is one of the drivers as we look to balance our schools. The other thing, I'm not sure that I heard you correct. It seemed like you were talking about a multicultural position, but then also a student achievement position. And I'm not sure that race and ethnicity drives student achievement results. So I'm not sure that I understand that point, and I may have missed your point there. But before I go deeper into that, I want to have Mr. Morrison address this.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that we're I think I understand what you're saying, but if you could give me maybe an example of an area you're concerned about where we're not looking at things geographically, but we're looking at things more from a socioeconomic, it would help us to give specific feedback to the board. So if you can maybe cite an area where you're concerned about that, it would be helpful to us that are sort of working behind the scenes.
It seems like on the boundaries near Whittier and then Memorial that we're pushing students out of one school and into the other to rebalance the socioeconomic makeup of the different middle schools.
Well, in the case of...
I think that makes perfect sense. I think what happened, listening in to the different task forces, different meetings, it seems like the primary driver became rebalancing the socioeconomic makeup of each school, and there wasn't a good balance between all 5 drivers, which were how close kids were, how safe it was for them to walk or get bused, how far away they were from different schools, whether different elementary schools were going to get broken up. It seemed like the task force got taken over by trying to rebalance the socioeconomic levels of each of the middle schools. And so I was thinking that if that's the intended consequence of other drivers, that's great. But I would also posit that there's an amount of money that is available in the Sioux Falls district available to put in extra teachers into the disadvantaged schools, which would give the disadvantaged children a greater educational experience. Why? Because there's about 5,000 kids in the Sioux Falls district that are going to private schools, and the property tax amount of money that is allocated for public school education could be used to hire additional teachers. So instead of having a 18-to-1 or 20-to-1 teacher-to-student ratio, you could knock that down to 10, and then you would have a much better chance in the disadvantaged, or what we were called in the Argus League, a forgotten school district. You would have a much better chance of educating these kids that are behind the curve, rather than trying to use boundary, or it's not redistricting, but reboundering allocations as a driver to rebalance the schools based on socioeconomic groups. And this is all that I heard on on YouTube and your closed captions broadcast. It just seemed that.
And I just want to make a couple comments. I don't think the task force was hijacked by, I think we had great diversity in the task force, in that we had people that thought socioeconomic balancing, some had a different view of that than others, but we had great representation. And in the end, they weren't the ones, or aren't the ones that will make the decision. They helped guide us in that. And I just wanted to point out a simple example of, for instance, Ben Rifle, the new middle school, when we drew that boundary, we simply did that on a geographic basis. And so that's really comprised of Rosa Parks, Harvey Dunn, John Harris, and then we moved Cleveland out of Whittier because it's closer to Ben Rifle, and that really made up Ben Rifle. And so when we dropped Cleveland out of Whittier, we were able to bring the rest of LBA into Whittier. And actually, that was a school that was split before, and now it can all completely go to Whittier. So I think that's an example of how we went about drawing the boundaries. And it probably was more geographically based than anything to try to keep contiguous elementary schools and middle schools together. So that's why I was trying to drill into your comments a little deeper to see what specific areas you were concerned about. But that gives you a little background, at least, on how the boundaries were developed. And of course, we're taking your comments and others to take forward to the board. So we certainly will take this one forward as well.
Thank you very much.
Just a reminder for those that just dialed in, if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please hit *1 on your telephone keypad, *1, and I'll access your line. Okay, we do have a question or comment from Troy Bitterman. Your line is live.
Hi, I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with everyone. I know this is difficult and a lot of people are frustrated with this. One of the key things I would like to see is if there's going to be more boundary changes in the Southeast in the future, if perhaps we could move towards those changes if possible.
What are you thinking of something specific there, Troy?
Well, if you do something where you move a school area outside, let's say you take an elementary and you're shipping them, or not shipping them, but you're busing them outside of their area. And let's say 5 to 10 years from now, you decide, well, not you, but it's decided that the boundary needs to change back. Would there be additional schools we'd put in the Southeast area, or are we pretty much looking at T absorbing the rest of that?
Well, we wouldn't. T wouldn't absorb anything from our school, inside our school district boundaries. But your question is a good one, and one may be similar to one we had, was either during session 3 or session 4, And how often do we do the rebalancing of the boundaries? And one of the things that I contend is even if we wouldn't have passed this bond issue, it was time for us to redo boundaries. We have some kids who live a long ways from their current building at every level currently. So I think it's important that the district does look at boundaries every, I think we have something actually written that says we should at least review them every 5 years. Maybe we don't change them, but we should at least review them. The other thing I would say is we've got Ben Rifle Middle School and Thomas Jefferson High School going in. But for anybody that remembers more of the specifics of the bond issue that was passed in 2018, we also have an elementary school that we will build. But we're still a few years away from building that, and quite frankly, today, we don't know where that will go for sure. So there will necessarily be another conversation in 3 or 4 years that centers on the elementary level for sure.
And I had one other question on that. Well, it's kind of related. Right now we have areas that are split, and they're looking at being changed where people have moved there expecting that school to be split. And those areas potentially will be moved back and unsplit, and then other areas that are currently split or currently not split would then be split. Is that something that's being taken into consideration?
Well, we look really carefully at split schools, and as I think you said, we have some that are split now, and what we try to do is we tried to minimize the splitting of elementary to middle school, that transition, and the splitting of middle school to high school, that transition. But I'm not sure you talked about schools that are split and won't be split in the future. Is that what you said?
Correct. Like right now, Edison is split. People have moved into that area on one side or the other, expecting their kids to go to Roosevelt or they're going to go to Lincoln. I think it was with middle school option A, all of Edison was moved over to, or maybe it was B, is moved over to Roosevelt. Versus at that point, with that change, more of the north side of the east would get moved up to Jefferson from that.
I'm not sure, Troy, about the specifics that you're talking about there. I'm looking around for some help in the room, and I'm not coming up with any. Would you have a chance to call in and ask us about that specifically? During the day tomorrow or later this week, we'll be happy to work through it with you.
Yeah, I can call about that. That's fine.
Okay.
What number would it be?
On our website, you'll find our office number.
Okay.
Or
thank you.
It's 367-7900. Or put it in on Let's Talk. We'll respond that way as well.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
If anyone that has just joined would like to ask a question, please hit *1 on your telephone keypad, *1, and I'll access your line. We still do have 2 more questions. Our next question comes from Erica Krugel. Your line is live.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking the time to receive our calls. At the time of the split, I will have a junior and a sophomore at Roosevelt, and I will have a 3rd grader at Discovery. And where you guys potentially will be putting your boundaries, my youngest for sure would end up traveling that distance to Thomas Jefferson. And I am comfortable as a teacher understanding that there'll be a ton of opportunities for him by the time he reaches that point. My concern and my question is if you have or could, before you make your final decision in June, as far as grandfathering or allowing students to stay at Roosevelt or who that might partake, if you could send out a survey monkey to our current sophomores and freshmen and ask them a question. If you had the choice, do you care which building you went to? Do you have a sibling that is going to be a freshman or a sophomore? My understanding is based on precedents in the past, that many times seniors get the option, or my hope would be the juniors and seniors do, as my junior is well established or will be well established by that point into some of the extracurriculars that may not be established yet at Thomas Jefferson. So my question is, would you guys, or are you considering getting a survey out to the current students to find out, what kind of level do you need to consider or look at for grandfathering for at least those first couple of years?
Yeah, really good questions, Erica. Let me address that a couple of ways. I don't anticipate that we'll send a survey out asking the freshmen and sophomores essentially if they want to stay in their building. I suspect I know how that would come back, and I'd hate for us to ask that question and then not be able to honor the response. So I don't know if we'd do that. But I think your points on grandfathering are really crucial to the conversation, and I really don't know how they will go, and I don't want to pin our Board of Education into a box. But I will tell you, I was in this room, listening to the task force debate whether or not grandfathering should take place at all. I was also leading the conversation with our student advisory group, which is freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors from every high school in the district, also in this room. And I was privy to both of those conversations. And to give you maybe an overly simplistic view from my recollection anyway, when asked if we should allow grandfathering for seniors, there was a pretty wide, yeah, I think we should. When asked if we should allow it for juniors, it was, oh, more probably, knowing that at some point in time we have to say students need to go to the new high school. So I don't say that as a point to say this is what our board will do. I'm saying that's how heavy that question is that the board has to wrestle with. It's the same at the middle school. Do 8th graders get to stay and finish their middle school experience if they're going to be an 8th grader or not? Do 5th graders get to stay at the elementary and finish their elementary experience or not? So the board has what I think are some very heavy questions and very emotional responses there. You have a junior. So that's,
yeah. He will be a junior at that point. He's a freshman this year, and has had some strong experiences in the music department specifically. Has had good experiences in other departments in athletics as well. But our biggest concern is that we are strong advocates within the choir department, music department, and I understand that at some point there'll be the same strength at Jefferson if that's what the teachers decide to go. But we know that Lincoln does not offer the level of choirs that Roosevelt offers and Washington offers. So there is something to be said that it's possible that Jefferson might not have the same level. Marching band isn't popular.
It's not possible. I'll tell you right now that will happen at Jefferson. But I understand your point. It's not the same at Lincoln as it is at Washington and Roosevelt.
So that's where I'm wondering within like a survey where there are kids that aren't involved in anything that are going to tell you they want to stay at Roosevelt, but they could go to Jefferson. And then there's some kids like my son who is going to be heavily embedded into music departments and other activities that he's going to lose. He potentially, we're early into that development, but we're potentially going to lose some of his driven activities that he could be potentially looking at as college opportunities. And so that's that's my concern for specifically my son, but also my daughter, is she is heading directly in that similar path. And I know that there are several of my son's groups that have come up, and we're all sitting within about 4 blocks of each other. And unless the boundary for Jefferson would get close to 12th Street, they would all be sent as juniors to Jefferson and lose out on some, potentially at this point, because you don't know what is going to be established up there right away, some very serious musical opportunities. That is my concern. So I know there's not a great way to do it, but if there was a way within a survey that said, what are you involved in at Roosevelt, and you looked at some different ways of grandfathering that were built around their desire to be Roosevelt through those couple of years that are left.
Yeah, your point's well taken. If there's any way we can find out that information, we'll do our best to do that. I want to stop short of promising you that, because I don't want to make you a promise that I can't honor. But your point's well taken. Maybe the impact isn't the same on student A as it is on student B. So I think that's something for us to look at. Also, as a father of 3, I know how emotionally charged activities can get. So I appreciate your point, and I know that that is weighing heavily on the board as they listen to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit *1 on your telephone keypad, *1, and I'll access your line. We do have a couple more questions in queue. Our next question comes from Dwayne Bickerson. Your line is live.
Hi, I just had a quick comment about the boundary. I think that option C would be the most fair, whereas right now or in the past, Axdale has been perceived as the more lower quality middle school. Now that's going to go away. I think McGovern would probably take that place, and I just think that a high school with option C would probably be the most fair, because otherwise the new high school would be more of like a middle school Axdale type thing, where it's perceived as a lower quality or just not as good of a high school as the other ones have been in the past.
Okay. Option C. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
If anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit *1 on your telephone keypad, *1, and I'll access your line. We do have a question or comment from Angie Roth. Your line is live.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I know this isn't an easy decision for anyone, but 100% we are supportive of new high schools and middle schools in the area, so thanks for all the work that you're doing. I just wanted to make sure that my voice got heard. Once boundaries are decided, we are 100% behind wherever our kids are assigned to go, but we live on Strabane, which is like right on the creek of the boundary by Roosevelt High School, so less than 1 mile from the school. And we will also have a junior and a sophomore when the new school opens. So I wanted to just put a plug in there that we feel pretty strongly that option C for the high school would be better, just because of some of these houses that are super close to the school that we could easily walk to. And then also with the whole sibling thing, I think that's going to be a very tough decision. First of all, I'd love my junior to be able to finish her high school career as an athlete at Roosevelt High School. And secondly, it would be much easier for us to send 2 kids 1 grade apart to the same school rather than having 2 cars and 2 separate places that we have to go. So I don't have any specific questions, just wanted to make sure that my voice was heard here, and thanks again for all the work you're doing.
Angie, what a great call. Thank you. I really appreciate the way you put the pressure on us in a very kind way. You and Erica, I think, need to get together. You both have a junior to be and a sophomore to be when we open up the new schools. I didn't make this comment when Erica called, but I should have. There are 2 things in terms of open enrollment or grandfathering that our board needs to consider. One is grandfathering allowed at all? 2 is, if grandfathering is allowed, how far down does it go? Is it just seniors? Is it seniors and juniors? At what point does that stop? And then a third thing that doesn't always get thought about, but I think, Angie, you and Erica will be thinking about this. If we are grandfathered, is there a tag-along provision for siblings? So if I have an older sibling who is in and a younger sibling who, if they were not the younger sibling, wouldn't be grandfathered in, can they stay in that school as well? And those are things that the board will consider. So thank you for your call, Angie. We really appreciate it. And your voice was heard. I promise you, I know I said this to Erica, that's going to be tough for the board. And if I was a handicapper, I wouldn't even know how to handicap where they'll set that grandfathering at, if they allow it at all. So those are good questions and weighty questions, and we'll see where those go in the next few weeks. Your voice was heard, and I know exactly where you live.
If anyone that has just dialed in would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad, star 1, and I'll access your line. We do have a question or comment from Lori Johnson. Lori, your line is live.
Yes. We live west of T. Ellis, so that pocket of houses near 26th Street. And what I've noticed is when you are looking at the houses west of T. Ellis, it's like they're all in or they're all out. I'm just wondering if the board or anyone has looked at those pockets that are just west of 26th Street area. They're just 1 mile from Memorial Middle School. Do all the pockets west of T. Ellis have to be together? Is it a busing issue? I'm just wondering. I'll have a 6th grader when this change happens.
Yeah, really good question. They do not have to, it's not if one goes, all go. So that could be a consideration of the board. I can tell you that that's the first that I've heard of that, Lori, so I'm glad you called in, and that'll be something for our board to consider. Because there are several pockets west of TLs as you describe it, and we do have them all going to the same direction, so that's a good point.
So the question is then, if they were to stay at Memorial, is it because of a busing thing? Or, I mean, there's that new crosswalk, like children could walk, safely to Memorial?
Yeah, no, it's not a busing issue for us. They're not being moved because of busing. That one is truly a distribution of the population issue more than anything else.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If anyone that has just joined would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad, star 1, and I'll access your line. We do have a question or comment from Debbie Johnson. Your line is live.
Hi, we are part of the same pocket area that the previous Lori Johnson was speaking about. I do have 2 students, one that is a junior that is going to be graduated, and then also a freshman that will be a junior. I will speak to as far as before and after school activities. When it came to issues of orchestra, band ensemble, cross country, any of those sports events, neither one of either myself or my husband would be able to pick them up. I was able to send them on a bike so that they could be involved in those activities, or my neighbor was easily able to go and get them for their activities and bring them home. If they would have been 4 miles away from here, those activities wouldn't have been a possibility. And I'm talking about, these are top-level musicians. So when you take those opportunities away and they're not able to be in those activities, then you take away opportunities for all-state musicians. I mean, my son that I'm talking about has been one of 5 all-state musicians for orchestra for all of his years since 6th grade. So if you take out those opportunities, you're taking away those things that really add to the students.
Yeah, point well taken.
anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad, star 1, and I'll access your line. There are no further questions in queue.
Well, I'll stall just a minute or two here. The couple of things. Number one, I know we had 78 people on our live stream earlier today. I don't know, or earlier tonight. I don't know what the number is right now, but as I mentioned at a previous meeting, it's hard for us to gauge how many people are actually listening, but if we've got 78 on the live stream, I assume we have a similar number or more on K-Learn TV. If we were sitting in an auditorium, I could see at least 78, if not 150 people in the auditorium. I would count that a really good response rate. So I appreciate that, especially tonight since we have a live town hall going on with Congressman Johnson, Senator Rounds, and Senator Thune. It's a pretty tough trio to try and buck. And so for those of you who are here and watching and listening tonight, and I know that just speaks to the importance and the emotion attached to this issue. So I can't promise you that we're going to make a decision that you love. I can promise you that we will put our hearts and our minds into doing this the best we can. Debbie, are there any calls?
We do have one more question from Debbie Johnson. Your line is live.
Debbie, you violated our rule.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment on the first one, but this is one of my last things I was going to ask about. So my senior, when she drove as a sophomore to Roosevelt, there was not adequate parking. Parking is only available for juniors and seniors, which I totally understand. And so in parking, they had to park in the neighborhood and walk probably 5 to 6 city blocks in order to get to Roosevelt. What kind of parking are you going to have at Jefferson? I can't imagine that you would have parking to accommodate 4 grades worth of students. And have you considered where the rest of these students will be parking since there is no neighborhood that's established, or side streets or sidewalks?
Yeah, we will have plenty of parking. I don't remember the number of stalls, but we will have plenty of parking at Jefferson High School. You got to remember at Roosevelt, we've got 2,400 kids in a building that was built for 1,800 students. And one of the things that's...
I understand that.
So when you think about that, there's an excess of 600 students, or 33% more than what the building was built for. But we do have that capacity from a parking perspective at Jefferson. It's a good question.
But there also are lots of neighborhood kids that are walking to Roosevelt that will be forced to drive. There's going to be way more kids forced to drive. I know for us, my daughter did not drive till she was a sophomore. If I were having a freshman, there is no way that I could get my child up to that remote area. They would be forced to drive or to carpool with somebody. So you're going to have more cars. You're going to have more kids on the road. You're going to have more accidents. And I've really wondered how the city of Ellis feels about all these kids driving up the Ellis Road and then hanging a right to go to the high school, because that's a really low speed area. So I think you really have to think outside of the box and really understand that the kids are not just parking in neighborhoods, they're parking in First Assembly parking lot and Apple Tree and all of the neighborhoods, and then walking in. And I understand the difference in the numbers of students, but because it's in such a remote area, you're going to be forcing people to have more children drive.
Thank you, Debbie.
If anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please hit star 1 on your telephone keypad, star 1, and I'll access your line. There are no further questions in queue.
Okay, well, we're very close to the end here. I want to thank you for being a part of this tonight, and some of you, I suspect, watched more than one of these, so thank you for your participation. Please know that we'll have a task force meeting yet to go. While the community engagement portion is concluded tonight, we'll also have a task force meeting where our task force will come back together one more time to talk about the issues that have come about during these 5 community engagement meetings. After that, the board our board will receive a report at a work session, and from there, our board will ultimately make some decisions. So while we're well down the process of putting the boundaries together, we still have quite a ways to go before the board makes decisions on June 22nd. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I appreciate all of your participation in the 5 community meetings. Debbie, thank you for being our moderator tonight, and to all of you, have a great night.